Welcome back. I'm Alfreda Lambremonta Webre, and today we have an extraordinary guest who, in my life personally, has created some events that I've participated in who really have opened my eyes and been great learning experiences for me. And this is Mark Passio of Inner Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and who's the creator, along with other deep friends and allies, of the Free Your Mind Conference. Welcome, Mark.
Alfred, thanks so much for inviting me onto the show today. It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah, I have quite an interesting background. I grew up in a standard, what you might call a standard South Philadelphian Catholic background. My family, Italian-American family in South Philadelphia, standard upbringing. And, you know, my family isn't the kind of people that really question things and, try to challenge the status quo, you might say. They're generally the kind of people who go along to get along, not what I would call overtly bad human beings, but just don't really question things too much, don't really strive to live outside the established paradigm. So in my youth, I was kind of given that cultural programming, and I didn't really question it very much when I was young. I kind of accepted the standard, well, this is what our parents were taught, and so, you know, this is what we teach our children, and that's what my parents and grandparents did for me, essentially. So, they handed down a lot of the cultural dogma, the cultural paradigm, their religious dogma, very much so, although I wouldn't call them any kind of strict religionists by anybody's standards. Just people who, as I said, don't really question the status quo or the received reality as, put forward by, the powers that be. So in my late grade school and early high school years, I really began to question a lot of these dogmatic belief systems that I had been kind of culturally indoctrinated into by my family, my parents, my teachers, etc. And because I really lacked a great deal of the knowledge required to understand religion as a, cross-cultural comparative framework, and I didn't understand astrotheology at the time. I didn't understand really essentially what religion was because I did not understand astrotheology. Lacking that frame of reference, when I started to come on to the understanding of it as a controlled paradigm, as a control system, to kind of stop people from looking into other areas of inquiry and stop them from really realizing the deep control system, the mind control system that the people of this planet are under. My questioning of my early religious indoctrination kind of lacked a certain perspective, and it didn't go in a positive direction. Instead, what happened is my questioning turned into extreme anger. And I kind of perceived it as, I was lied to and not given the facts, not given the information that I required or needed when I was younger, and kind of went down a pathway of lies. And so what I did in that lack of knowledge and in that anger is I gravitated to what I considered to be, what I sought out to be, the antithesis of those religious frameworks or that religious background. And I found it in the form of Satanism. I looked into dark occultism and Satanism, particularly in an intellectual sense, looking at books on the topic at first. And I studied and looked into dark occultism in general and Satanism in particular, the ideology, the religious ideology of Satanism, which I could talk about what that is in a little while. But to wrap up the background, I basically started espousing satanic ideology and, putting it out there through writing in different fanzines and magazines and in music in different bands that I was in my youth. And eventually some of the work that I had put out there ideologically was recognized by the founder of the modern, what you would call satanic ideology or religion, Anton LaVey, who was at that time the high priest of the church of the organization, the dark occult organization on the west coast of the United States known as the Church of Satan, based in San Francisco, California. LaVey recognized my work and liked it. Again, writing and music and lyrics, etc. And I feel that he kind of recognized certain communication skills that that organization could use or exploit or put into their service. And he wrote to me and appointed me to the rank of priest in the organization of the Church of Satan back in 1996. I, became involved at what I would consider a low level in that organization, although I held the rank of priest. But my involvement with many different satanic groups grew. And I began to become aware that this really wasn't just an isolated group of individuals who were working with occult knowledge for their own personal reasons. It was actually a very eclectic array of people from every walk of life and every cultural and social institution on the face of the earth that was working together in sort of a very tight-knit way for common goals, for an agenda, a very directed and specific agenda. They were comprised of people from politics, banking, law enforcement, military, media, entertainment, education, medicine, technology, you name the sector of human endeavor, you name the cultural or social institution. And there were people who held high-level positions of influence and power in those institutions involved with Satanism. And as I said, they were not working separately. They were working together toward a common goal, which was to increase their own collective power as a group entity at the expense of everyone else's freedom, at the expense of everyone else's rights, at the expense of everyone else's wealth, and anything else that they could take from people to forward themselves and hold other people in thrall and hold other people in check. So when that awareness dawned on me, because again, my reasons for even looking into the occult were backlash against the religious indoctrination I had received, combined with my own egoic will or my egoic mindset, my ego-based mindset at the time to want personal influence or power over others. If you could get that in a psychological way, in an ideological way, if you understood things about the human psyche that other people didn't understand, and that's kind of like what some of this ideology promised. They call it the left-hand path. You hoard knowledge, you study things that other people don't understand, otherwise known as the occult, that knowledge which is hidden from other people. That's all the word occult means, is hidden. And in accruing and sequestering that knowledge from others, you gain a tactical power advantage over them because they lack that framework and they're open to manipulation of all kinds, so of all sorts. So, that's what I thought the dark occult was in general when I was first looking into it. It was a personal tool. I didn't really understand the extent to which it was an organized group of people at the highest levels of power of social institutions that was essentially using that knowledge to enslave. And my agenda was perhaps selfishness, perhaps advantage over other people, but it was never enslavement. My moral sensibilities were never that degraded, although they were very, very degraded in my youth. But not to the extent where I favored or wanted enslavement of other people. So my conscience wouldn't allow me to proceed any further, and I started to take a step back and started to, realize how these lower level satanic organizations, these grottos as they called them, were really operating as what you might call psychological vetting systems or psychological filtration systems. What these lower level groups that I had become involved with, and I just don't want people to get the idea that I had become involved in any kind of real super high up level dark occult organizations. It's not like I was a member of the Bohemian Club or Bohemian Grove or, what people might term the Illuminati or the high level elites, or high level dark Luciferian groups. This was Satanism at a level that interfaced with the public. And what I feel that they were doing was interfacing with the public in order to psychologically vet certain people, to look for certain psychological characteristics that they were looking for, namely people who were on what you might call the brink of secondary psychopathy, who had psychopathic tendencies, but maybe were not full-blown psychopaths, who would basically follow their orders and do what they were told for promises of power or influence. And, you know, they were psychological filtration systems. They were looking for people with a certain mindset and certain characteristics and skill sets, particularly communication skill sets, I felt, which is why I think they, you know, kind of took me under their wing and groomed me for a time.
Right. Could I ask you this, because I'm not familiar with Satanism.
Okay.
Is there a worship component to it? Kind of religious component where people go into reverie and incantation and manifest either Satan or diabolical entities to help them in this dimension?
My answer to that would be no, in the traditional religious sense of that line of questioning. I would say that they have an archetypal idea that they put up on a pedestal. I don't think you would use the term worship. Their God is the ego, is the deeply entrenched ego.
Okay.
Or the kind of organized Satanism that I was a member of or involved with. You know, many people will hear that I was involved in the Church of Satan and they think it's a very innocuous group. And in the large amount of their membership, I would say that it is. It's just people who are like myself who kind of agree ideologically with some of its main tenets, but they don't understand how this ideology is really running this planet. It is the ideology of the people who are really in power in this planet, on this planet right now. So part of the problem is that the general population doesn't understand what Satanism really is. They have an idea of what they think that it is, and they have people who are, you know, giving them some ideas of what it is, namely like Hollywood scripts and movies and things like that, or, you know, fictional allegories or fictional, works of literature. But they have not really read anything dealing with the actual ideology of what Satanism, modern Satanism, really is. And it's very different than what most people think that it is, in the sense that it's not the worship of the Christian archetypal entity of the devil or Satan. This is used as a trapping or used as an archetypal figure to basically represent the adversary or the opposer of the godlike state of mind or holiness, or, you know, a moral code, a moral tradition, something to that effect. This is set up as the polar opposite of that, the diametrically opposed opposite of that. Hence, the trappings and the symbolism are taken from, you know, the Christian Satan or Christian Lucifer or Christian devil, and they're employed in that. The rituals that they use are largely psychodramatic, and therefore energy transference. They do believe in energy transference and the manipulation of subtle energies. So they call that magic, or left-hand path magic, and it is quite real to them. And I could talk about their idea of the concept of a mastermind, which was also used in certain grottos that I attended. But let me just establish the basic ideological tenets of Satanism, because most people are completely unfamiliar with Satanism as an ideology. The first overall tenet is the self is higher than anything else. There is no force that's higher than the self, and as such, since the self is essentially, or the ego is essentially the god of this quote-unquote religion, self-preservation becomes its highest aspiration, its highest goal, its highest law. The survival of the physical being, the survival of the body, the survival of the ego is put on a pedestal above all else. So it doesn't make a difference what you have to do to ensure that survival. It doesn't make a difference what you have to do to ensure your current level of social status either. You can step on people that are below you. You can be as ruthless as possible. Compassion doesn't really have to enter into the picture in any way whatsoever, and is generally even frowned upon in many cases. It's cold-bloodedness. It's dog-eat-dog worldview, and you have to come out on top regardless of what you have to do that. That's the first tenet. The first tenet is essentially the worship of the self, and self-preservation coming before anything, most of all, morality. Okay? Coming before any kind of morality whatsoever. You know, do what you have to do to get ahead, and whoever has to get stepped on in the process, so be it. And if you just take that first overarching tenet and you look at the world around us, it could be a very easy extrapolation to just make the realization that the world is in a satanic mindset from the very, very first tenet. Most people of the world think like this because this is an extension of what you might call social Darwinism, or what you would call social Darwinism. So that's actually one of its later tenets, which I'll get to in a moment. But the second tenet of the satanic ideology is moral relativism. A very, very, very dangerous proposition, a dangerous ideology, a dangerous belief system. What moral relativism postulates is that there is no such thing as objective right and wrong. Right and wrong, as a moral relativist would have people believe, are simply, as a moral relativist would state, constructs of the human mind. They don't exist in any form in nature. They're not objective. They cannot be objectively measured. They're not objective standards in any way. And essentially, man gets to choose and decide what is right for himself and what is wrong for himself. So if something that benefits me greatly harms many, many other people, that's good. That's a good thing, because I can only look at right and wrong as relative. It doesn't make a difference whether somebody else's rights are being trounced. It doesn't make a difference whether somebody else's freedom is being destroyed. If I'm making out like a bandit in a certain situation, then that's fine and that's good and that should continue. This is how a moral relativist really sees things. It's no objective standard for ethics whatsoever, and there's no real objective difference between right and wrong to a moral relativist. That's the second basic tenet of Satanism, and you could see how it goes hand in hand with the ideology of self-preservation first and above all else, including ethics. The third major tenet, as I briefly alluded to, is social Darwinism. This is an extension of the macrobiological Darwinian evolutionary theory put forth by Charles Darwin, and then basically grafted onto by the Daltons and other cultural and social engineers and eugenicists of his day, and brought into the human social realm in the form of social Darwinism, which essentially postulates that people get to the positions of power that they get to because they are our genetic betters, that they're somehow our genetic superiors, and therefore, the most ruthless and the ones who have the genetic makeup that it takes to get to the top strata of society are just better, and nature has somehow socially, chosen them, and it has exercised, adaptation, to basically put them in the positions that they need to be in, and they should basically get to rule the roost. The most vicious, the most ruthless. That's kind of like survival of the fittest in the animal kingdom. Well, we're taking that into the social realm, and we're applying the dictum of survival of the absolute most ruthless, and they come out on top, and that somehow that is fine and it should be that way, and there's no ethical considerations that even need to be looked at or measured when it comes to that belief system. That's social Darwinism, and you could see many people in the corporate world have this kind of an ideology. Many people throughout society believe this, so again, you just look at these tenets, these three basic tenets so far, and you see a vast swath of the population actually is engaged in satanic thinking and doesn't even understand it to be Satanism. They think that they are just normal individuals engaged in just their own belief structure, their own belief system, but really what they actually believe in a very deep way is Satanism without actually applying the word or the term to the belief system. The fourth and final tenet is eugenics. When you take these other three tenets to their final destination, to their full spectrum, if you will, you get eugenics, which is essentially, since, we are the best, we are the highest power, we are the ones who decide right and wrong for ourselves, we are the ones who have risen to the top strata of society, and we're ruling. We've established ourselves as an essential ruling class. Well, we can get to decide who lives and who dies, who passes on their genes and who does not, who gets to breed and who doesn't get to breed. So we'll essentially play God and get to decide who gets to propagate their gene pool in the world. That's what eugenics is all about. And you put these four tenets together and you have a basic ideological framework for what the quote-unquote religion, or ideology as I would simply call it, of Satanism is. I do feel that it is a religion in the classical and traditional sense of the word. If we go down to the etymological root of religion and know that it comes from the Latin relegare, which means to hold back or to thwart from forward progress. A false religion will thwart someone from forward progress in consciousness and true evolution in their being and in their morality and in their moral understanding. So in that sense, I do feel Satanism, modern ideological Satanism, is most certainly a dark and false religion.
Right, right. If I compare at least a number of the qualities there, say with even modern sociological or psychological criteria, they would fall in the sociopathic or even psychopathic column.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you feel, or?
I feel psychopaths are running these institutions. I feel that psychopaths are running this religion. I think that they're looking for other people with psychopathic tendencies and characteristics psychologically, hallmarks of what I would call secondary psychopathy. I think primary psychopaths just naturally gravitate to these kinds of positions of power, positions in government, positions where they have some level of control over other individuals, where their decisions are affecting greatly the lives of other individuals. And therefore, they naturally gravitate to a lot of these social institutions and occult organizations like this. So absolutely, psychopathy is a huge, huge part of this. And as I said, it's a psychological vetting system and filtration system to try to interface with the public, identify secondarily psychopathic individuals who have a lot of skill sets that they could exploit toward their benefit in their agenda. Absolutely.
So you were saying that at some point you came to a level of awareness.
Yes.
Could you go on with that?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. That's exactly what I wanted to get into talking about. I wasn't what I would consider a secondary psychopath at the time that I got involved in the dark occult. I probably would have gone full-blown into secondary psychopathy at some point in the future had not my life taken the reverse course that it eventually did. I consider that I had what I would call sociopathic tendencies or psychopathic tendencies, but I don't think it ever blossomed into full bore secondary psychopathy, because I still had a modicum of conscience and an ethical code, an ethical standard. And again, as I said, I may have wanted influence and control over my fellow man in my very ignorant and egoic mind state at the time, but slavery was never something that I was ever about, ever. So when I realized that what this agenda truly was about human slavery and keeping humanity under slavery indefinitely, my conscience that was left in me, the amount of conscience that I still had left in me, would not allow me to proceed with my involvement with these organizations. And when I vocalized that, there was no backlash at all. There was no outcry, no backlash when I vocalized it to some of the people in slightly higher level positions within these organizations and grottos, as they call them. That's what they call their coven systems, grottos. There was no desire to see me stay. It was, okay, little boy, are you through now? And there's the door, and don't let it hit you on the rear end on the way out, because you think we need you. We already have the world. We already have the world under control. We own this place. You know, we're the owners and keepers of this place. You know, we were going to let you in on that. You know, and you think we need you for that? We already have that and maintain that. You know, we were grooming you to take up your position in that hierarchical structure, in that institutional level of control. So they were just like, you don't want to be a part of that? Well, goodbye and good riddance to you. You know, it was no concern whatsoever absolutely no concern with what I could do, what I could expose. As a matter of fact, one of them actually specifically said to me, go ahead and tell anybody what you think you know about how this works, how we operate, what we do, the level of control we have over the entire, the entire culture. They said, not only will not they accept it from you, will they not understand or accept it from you, if we came forward and told people how we're in power, they would not grasp it or understand it coming from us if we told them exactly who we are and how we do it. They said that's how much perfect mind control we have these people under. So one of these individuals actually said to me, go and bang your head against a cinder block wall for the rest of your natural life. You will accomplish nothing. Essentially, you're throwing away your life by going and trying to speak to the profane cattle, the profane human hordes, and they're not going to want to hear what you have to say, and they're not going to want to listen, and go do your worst. That was the sentiment that was echoed to me repeatedly by people. And when I left, there was no communication, never any other communication, no attempt to bring me back into their fold whatsoever. It was as if I never existed, as if I ceased to exist.
Right, and there was no attempt to retaliate against you.
None whatsoever. Because I think they look at that as that would be validation of what I'm saying. They don't want to bring any attention to my message, certainly. But in many ways, they don't consider it a threat whatsoever because they realize they have such tight control over people's minds in a general sense. Not all minds, quite certainly. There are people who are free of their mind control, but they're few and far between. And most people still believe in this lower level ideology, what I call, I kind of give it a funny term. I call it mini-me Satanism, like in that Austin Powers movie, Dr. Evil, the big version of it makes his little clone variant, and it's a lower level, mini-me, So mini-me Satanism is what the public has accepted as their own ideology. Self-preservation above all else. Me. I have to come first. Screw everybody else. Dog eat dog world. You got to do what you can to, step over the next guy, and be first in line, so to speak. Moral relativism, forget a moral standard, forget objective morality. It's whatever's good for me is good. Whatever's bad for my immediate situation is bad and I want no part of, And then social Darwinism, people really believe, oh, well, hey, if these people came out to the top of the pecking order, maybe they deserve it somehow. Maybe, that's just the natural order of things, that you hear this idea of that this is the natural order, and all it is essentially Satanism in a nutshell. That's all it is. And this is what people really believe deep down in their minds and hearts. And as long as the general population accepts a watered down, or what I call mini-me variant of the higher level satanic ideology that's really controlling the world, they will always be enslaved. Until the mindset changes, the paradigm that we witness out in the external reality cannot change.
That's very interesting. Now, what in that view, which I find very compelling, what, for example, is the function of these, all of these kind of upper theater people, from Prince William to all the President of the United States to rock stars going, all the Satan symbols like this. They're all flashing that. Why do they do that?
I would say that's more of simply a gesture that, they're showing off that, hey, we're involved, and, we are letting people know who we are. Many of them will term this the externalization of the ruling hierarchy, the externalization of the ruling class, quote-unquote, elite hierarchy. Many of them want to come out in the open and just project who they are out in people's face and say, we are your owners, we are your masters, we are your rulers. There's nothing you could do about it because we have all the wealth, we have all the influence, we have all the power. And essentially, as long as there's people who are willing to do our bidding and follow orders and take a paycheck to essentially destroy other people's rights and freedom, we will forever own you. And they want to come out in the open and just make the current covert slavery hierarchy that they're basically in charge of and ruling right now. They want many of them to make it an overt one, an overt system of rulership, as it once was in the ancient past. You know, there's nothing new about this system of slavery. It has existed since humanity has existed. The difference is right now it's covert. And they don't want it to be covert. They want it to go back to the old way of being out in the open, in your face, and with that class as kingship. In the new feudalism, they want a neo-feudalism worldwide hierarchy, a worldwide agenda of neo-feudalism, and they want their small social strata to be essentially the king of that new neo-feudal society. And I would say a lot of the symbolism that they're putting in society, a lot of the symbolism they're putting in pop culture and art and music, etc., is to essentially taunt people and say, we could bring this right out in the open in your face, and you still can't see it. The sheep, the cattle, as they call them, the dead. They call people the dead, by the way. That's their name for the average individual that is clueless as to their agenda, clueless as to how the world really works. They don't call them really the profane or the cattle or the golems. Their name for them within Satanism, at least, is the dead. That's what they refer to the average individual as, because the rationale for that term is people are ignorant, people are apathetic, and people are both lazy and cowardly in their behavior. So if you're apathetic in the mind, okay, that's the first. I'm sorry, if you're unknowledgeable, if you're ignorant in mind, that's the first aspect of consciousness. The first expression for consciousness is thoughts. Okay, the mind, in the mind-body-spirit connection. Okay, mind, thoughts. That's the first expression of consciousness. Well, if you don't have a developed intelligence, if you don't have developed knowledge, if you haven't taken knowledge into yourself, okay, then that's total ignorance. In the state of knowledge that we exist in the world, with knowledge present everywhere around us, those of us who refuse to take in that knowledge and weed down through it and grasp it and understand it and then start putting it to use in our lives are willfully ignorant. We don't live in a nescient society. Nescience means you don't know because you have no opportunity to know because the knowledge isn't present. The opportunity for learning is not present. That's not the society that human beings live in. They live in a society where we're drowning in knowledge. There's so much knowledge, it's almost hard to weed through it to acquire what you really want and need in some cases. And yet people are still willfully refusing knowledge, willfully choosing to remain in their comfortable state of ignorance. So that's the failure of intelligence, that's the failure of knowledge, and that's what ignorance is, willful ignorance. And so that's the first aspect of consciousness that is dead in most people. The second is apathy, caring. You know, care has to drive your desire to know. So if your heart is deadened, if you don't care about what's going on, if you don't care that the world's coming into a state of slavery and people are losing their rights and freedoms, well, that's the second aspect of consciousness. This is the spiritual aspect of the being that is deadened and not working, that people don't have care, they are in apathy. And if both of those aspects are deadened, if the heart and the head are both deadened, care and knowledge, okay, then you can't actually act in a wise capacity, wisdom. You can't put your actions, your behaviors into effect in the world in a wise capacity because you don't know and you don't care. So that's the deadness of right action in the world. So that's being lazy and cowardly, not taking right action. And if all of those aspects, your thoughts, emotions, and actions are deadened, meaning that the mind, body, and spirit are all deadened, okay, these people, these dark occultists, look at it for all intents and purposes as if all the aspects of the consciousness of the being are deadened and not active, not awakened. Therefore, they look at that being as spiritually dead, as if they're just a clump of animated matter or animated clay that's going through rote actions in the world in a purely rote survival mechanistic way, and yet they're essentially a dead being to them. So they look at all the things that they're doing to people in the world as, well, we're not even doing this to real people, to live people. We're doing this to the dead. And they look at it, well, we don't really have too much moral culpability for what we do to these people because they don't know what we're really doing. They don't care about what we're doing, and they're not going to lift a finger to stop us. And so they just look at it like we could do whatever we want, And in many ways, I can't disagree with their assessment. I disagree with their motives. I disagree with their plan. I disagree with what they are doing. Do I kind of see most people in that way? I don't see many people in an awake state personally. I understand why these psychopathic people who are essentially ruling the world see others like that. I try not to see other people like that. I try not to, but they keep giving these people the justification to see them like that because they're not really changing and awakening the levels of consciousness that need to be awoken in order to stop these individuals. I do think that their plans have been somewhat slowed by the exposure that many researchers have brought to bear and the knowledge that they've distributed. So that's a good and encouraging sign. However, human slavery is still firmly entrenched in place, and what people think of as being somewhat free isn't what real freedom is. To get to the level of freedom that is true freedom, we're so far away from that it's almost laughable in my estimation. People are so far away from understanding what it means to truly live in harmony with moral law, or what I call natural law, that we're almost in the kind of polar antithesis of what it really means to live in accordance with those natural laws of morality and conscience. And they are seemingly no closer to understanding them because of the kind of dual imbalanced mindset that exists in the quality of the people of the world overall as a species. And that would be a very left brain imbalanced mindset of being in control, or being a order giver, or being somebody who wants to control other people as well. Okay. And then you have very right-brained approach, which is we can't really stand up and take any action, real action in the world. We just have to do this through meditation or prayer or visualization or other new age variant, mindsets, etc., or energy work. I think we're somewhere in this uncomfortable, punctuated state of equilibrium slavery is where we're at now. Covert slavery that is kept that way, kept covert, because the ruling class doesn't have enough fully overtly going for them to just completely externalize their hierarchy, as many of them want to do, and take everything outwardly and just say, we're the ruling class, we are your gods, and come right out with it and say, yeah, you are our cattle, you are our slaves, and there's nothing you could do about it. They're not at the point where they can or are ready to do that. But nor do I see it at the point where other people are at the point where they're completely saying no to this global slavery hierarchical structure. There are so many people, literally there's billions of people on this planet who give their ideological support for violence and slavery every day. Every person who agrees that government should even exist is giving ideological support for slavery. Everybody who believes that police institutions should exist, everybody that believes that military institutions should exist, are giving their ideological position away and saying, I support violence, I support the ideological position of slavery and perpetual warfare and ruling class and man getting to make up what laws are, man getting to essentially decide, what right and wrong are, and and it's the ideology of order following. I'm going to eventually do a new presentation coming up in the future at some point. I've basically started working on an outline of it that's going to talk about nothing but the dynamic of order following as the most significant evil state of mind that has ever existed and continues to exist for another. And just think about the numbers of order followers that exist worldwide. The amount of people who are told what they should do and do it without actually ever questioning that entire paradigm or way of existence, that way of life. How many people actually say on a day-to-day basis in taking the next action that they're going to take, I have thought this action fully through and know fully, because I know within myself the actual difference between right and wrong behavior, and I am myself willfully choosing right action over wrong action in this instance because I fully know the difference between those two dynamics. I would say it's a paltry handful of people worldwide. If I really were honest, and in a very honest dynamic, thinking about that, how many people really truly know deep down inside themselves the moral difference between right and wrong behavior, fully know it, not a belief system, know it fully, and can say, I am following no one else's orders or even suggestions. I know it for myself. Knowledge, it's not my belief system. You either know the difference between right and wrong, or you do not know the difference between right and wrong. And what I'm saying is the vast majority of human beings do not know the difference between right and wrong, sadly, which is why we're in this state of punctuated slavery that is possibly going to last millennia if we're not, if we don't really radically, truly awaken our consciousness to that difference between right and wrong action. So just think about the number of police that exist in the world, okay? You look at how many police exist on a police force in any given city, and then just extend that, and you think every single settlement of people on the surface of this planet, just about, not quite every, but just about every single settlement of people, no matter how small the town, village, hamlet, up to a major metropolitan city, in many cases has multiple police forces operating within that vicinity, within that territory. So you're talking about hundreds of millions of people who are direct followers of orders just right then and there that constitute a standing army, in many cases a militarized standing army living amongst their populations. Then you extend that to how many military people exist for every single individual country on the earth. And you add that to that number. How many people are mindless government employees who just do their rote job like robotically on a day-to-day basis, taking an order from a superior above them who's giving that to them, and then they're saying, yes, sir, I carry out this order, and then I give my orders to the people who are below me in a rote, roboticized fashion. When you add all this up, I would say it constitutes literally billions of people. I would say over half of the human population are order followers. And I would say probably a good 10% of them, minimal, are hardcore, brainwashed order followers who will do any order no matter how immoral it is, who will take any action as long as they can have the so-called justification or the so-called cop-out of saying, someone else gave me this order, and therefore I'm not truly responsible for what happens if I carry it out. That's called justification. You're trying to pass the buck or the blame onto someone else, and you saying, because someone ordered me to do this, and I'm in their social institution as their superior who is pledged to follow their order, that somehow I'm not responsible for the harm that the carrying out of that order causes. And it's a total bunk, nonsense argument that the Nazis tried during the war crimes tribunals at Nuremberg, and it didn't fly there, and it shouldn't fly in modern society if we're truly moral individuals, if we are individuals who have some sort of ethics and really do know the difference between right and wrong. My overall argument and way I look at the dynamic that you presented, Alfred, is that the vast majority of humanity, unfortunately, is still not at the point where they themselves as single individuals can elucidate and enunciate the true moral difference between right and wrong behavior, and deeply understand how all order followers since the beginning of time have always been diametrically opposed to the concept of being a true moral individual, because you don't listen to what someone else is telling you to do. You carry out an action because you know deep in your mind and heart that it is either the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I would say we're very, very, very far away from the vast bulk of humanity truly being in that higher state of consciousness, and I would say the vast majority of them are still in that lower state of consciousness where they act in many cases as order followers or ideologically support the dynamic of order following.